Hey everyone, today we're talking about media theory, more specifically the actual medium that's being used. So let's get started. The first task right here is talking about medium-specific meta messages being sent to users through services like Wikipedia, Facebook, Twitter, and what's the common factor of all those services. I would say that all of those services definitely focus on information and sharing that information. They all go about doing that in different unique ways, but that's the common factor. They also all allow users to manipulate and edit information, which is a really cool thing, but it can also be a little dangerous. Wikipedia has some safeguards in place to help maintain the integrity of their information. So, whereas the information is curated and provided by the user, there are moderators who are checking facts and checking information, checking sources to try to maintain accountability as best as they can, and they're pretty good at it. And of course, there's always some wiggle room and funny things that get slipped in, but normally they're taken down pretty quickly. Whereas Facebook and Twitter, there's a little more freedom, and it's because they're personal social media sites where the users can put whatever information they want on their post. And in conclusion, I would say that the meta messages being sent from these services are that you, the user, have information that is valuable and that we want you to share that with the world. And no matter what it is, negative, positive, controversial, or just what you ate for lunch that day. What you have to say is important. And I think that's the message they're trying to send to their users. That's why people keep coming back to it and sharing all of those things. Um, the next task is talking about, is there an example of medium from my area of expertise that's difficult to explain to outsiders? I'm a first grade teacher, so there's a lot that's really hard to explain to outsiders. But one thing really in particular that came to mind is like teaching a child to read. So it's really hard to explain that process to even to parents and to people outside of the profession or outside of early childhood, because yes, there's all of these technical aspects to it, like phonics and decoding and fluency and comprehension and all of this, but then there's so many other factors like home life, language development, motivation, different things like that, to where it's really hard to share that with others, outsiders, without one, them being overwhelmed by it, or two, just oversimplifying it. And it's just a really cool thing to get to witness in my job, because it's incredible to watch a small child be able to learn to read all this complex language and comprehend it. And it's pretty incredible, but it's definitely hard to explain to people outside the field without just completely oversimplifying it or overcomplicating it. So, next task is talking about Calvin Ball and how that fits into these points of view. And Calvin Ball is really just the making up the rules as you go type of game and using whatever you have on hand, which is really similar to how little kids play games. So, just making it up as you go. And that's kind of similar to the people's point of view in this article, talking about how Medium is ever changing and evolving based on needs and what's around and how the world is changing. And so I would say it's very similar. The next task is talking about how a personal office app like Microsoft PowerPoint shape our perception of presentational needs, and is Prezi an alternative? I personally think that Prezi is just a fancy version of PowerPoint. I think that people use it in the same exact way as PowerPoint, where I think there's ways to use both of those tools innovatively and make them engaging. But I see a lot of people using Prezi in the exact same way that people use PowerPoint, which is just slide after slide of lots of text and the traditional outline, and just making the audience very passive. where I don't think that is the best use of either of those tools. But as far as how it shapes our perception of presentational needs, I think that's a personal thing because for me, I obviously think that because I've seen so many presentations like that using PowerPoint and Prezi, that it's shaped how I view them and how whenever I am using those tools, I want to make them as interactive as possible, and not have them be the traditional way of presenting information because I've just seen the negative outcomes of that. So that's my personal perspective. For the next task, I would say the treachery of any media, especially a photo of an object like the pipe, is that it's up for interpretation. So, however the viewer is going to interpret it is going to be different. And as an artist or as the creator of it, the product, you have to be aware of that. That a medium as one dimensional as a picture is going to be interpreted in many ways. Even a movie or a television show can be interpreted in so many different ways, but there's a little more room there for clarification. And that's where the art comes in, I think. I thought it was really interesting how they talk about medium being a culture or a society or a place, which is really interesting. And I also really like the examples of improv as being disruptive because I would say improv is very disruptive by nature, just to even within its own setting, the theater, it kind of breaks a bunch of norms and rules. And then also improv being done in these places was disruptive to the environment and to the medium where they were, which is really interesting. This task is very difficult. How would you explain water to a fish? I think I would begin by explaining it as a way that they have life, because for a fish, water is their life source. It's how they breathe and swim, and it's like their air around them. So I think you could describe it similarly as how we describe air to humans. I don't know, just a thought. And how would you point to cultural practices and culturally established attitudes without describing them in an abstract manner? I think that the way like how that was described or shown in those improv videos and sketches where it's almost immersing the participants in the irony or the humor of it or the disruption. It's making them be a part of it to where it's more effective, I think, than just explaining it, because that's not always easily understood when you're so immersed in a medium or a culture. Overall, I really enjoyed this reading. A lot of it really kind of went over my head a little bit. I had to reread and research outside of this article, but I thought it was very interesting. But there was a lot of jargon and terminology I didn't quite understand upon first read. So I hope that my responses make sense, but I was kind of talking through them with you guys. So yeah, thanks.